Hey guys, this is Mr. Waltz, and I'm going to show you how to do the computer-aided manufacturing setup for making your dice on the Glowforge laser cutter. Okay, so hopefully you have a bunch of parts and an assembly. If not, go get that done. Um, and what we're going to do is make a new design. You can do File, New Design, or just use the untitled one that's here, or you can hit the plus sign. Um, And what we want to do is bring in our parts that we want to cut, and we're going to lay them out. So we're going to save this first. We're going to call this cam layout, and that cam, again, computer aided manufacturing. Uh, so we're going to go over here and start bringing our parts in. So I'm going to start with the front. So I right click on front, insert into current design, and it'll bring it in. It'll put it at the origin, which is fine. I'm just going to hit OK. We'll leave it there. I'm going to zoom out a little. We'll get our next piece. I'm going to do the back next. I'll right click that, insert it into the design. And you'll see it puts it right on top of the front. I'm going to rotate to the front view here. And what we want to do is spread these out so that they're lined up close to each other, but there is a little gap between them. So if you grab this little arrow, you can move this up and you'll notice it clicks every about zero point 0.1 inches. And what we want to do is move it so it's just a little bit above. You can see it's 1.3 inches. That way we have a small space between them. And then I'm going to click OK. So I got my front and my back. I'll do my top and my bottom next. So I right click top, insert into design. Um, I'm going to drag this over here to the right. Get that again, not even with it. I want to go just a little bit past 1.3 inches is the right number for this size object. Hit OK. We got our top. Let's get our bottom. Right click, insert into design. Again, drag it over to the right. I'm lining it up with the top, and then I'm going to drag it up here. And you can see how I'm laying these out in kind of a grid pattern. And then I'm going to get left and right. So I'll get my left, insert, drag this over. I got to zoom out a little. Okay. Hit OK. And the last one is going to be the right. So right click, insert it in design. So we're basically laying these out the way we want the laser to cut them. And we want them to be close, like I said, but with a little gap so that they don't, get stuck together basically. So hit OK. So there's all the pieces. We don't want them to move around in case we accidentally click on something. So I'm going to go over here in the browser, click on the front, hold shift, click on the bottom one. That selects the whole list. Then you can right click and do ground. So now we got these in here. I'm going to click save again. And we've got it laid out. And the next thing we want to do is do the actual manufacturing. So there's a little workspace control right here. And right now we're on design. We're designing stuff. And we're going to go to a new place. We're going to go to manufacture. And so manufacturer will let us set up what we want the cutter to do. So we're going to go to manufacture here. So now we're in manufacture mode. And we got a bunch of new tools. And fortunately, we don't have to use that many of them. So the first we're going to do is setup. I'm going to click setup and create new setup. And over here on the right, it's going to say machine. We can just leave that open. Make sure your operation type is cutting, because that's what we're doing here is cutting. You don't need to mess with the work coordinate system. You do need to click down here where it says model. Right now it says nothing. Click that. And what we want to do is click all of the parts that we want to cut. So I'm going to click on all of these so that they're all selected. So all 6 pieces are selected. It knows we want to cut those. And we're going to click OK. All right. So now it knows what we want to cut, and then we're doing cutting. Great. Next thing we need to do is set up our laser cutter. So on Classroom, there's going to be 2 files. And what you want to do is download those. One of them is going to be a tool library, and the other is going to be a post processor. Put them in your downloads folder on your computer. What we're going to do now is we go up to cutting here. We're going to click cutting and 2D profile. And this brings up a new window, and you can see it wants us to pick a tool. So what we need to do now is bring our tool into Fusion. So click select. We're going to go down here where it says cloud, click on that, or right click, and you're going to see import libraries. So I'm on cloud, I right click, import libraries, and then go to your downloads folder and get your Glowforge Pro tools file, which you should have downloaded from Classroom, and double click that. And that will install the Glowforge Pro on your cloud library for Fusion. You can see it has two materials in it right now, which is plywood 3mm and clear acrylic 3mm. Um, so that's all good. Right now we get to pick which cutter we're going to use. So now you get to decide which material. Are you going to use wood or are you going to use the clear acrylic? I'm going to do the wood on mine, but feel free to use clear acrylic. We have plenty of that material. You'll notice when I click here, um, over here on the right, there's some information about the tool. And specifically, it has the kerf width. And if you recall, kerf is the amount of wood, the width of the cut. And so that's basically going to let us compensate for that so that our parts don't come out too small or too big. Anyways, you can click select. And now the tool's loaded. So now what we got to do with our tool is we get to define our cuts. So we have the tool selected. There it is, laser cutter, Baltic birch plywood 3mm. Cutting mode, we're going to do the cuts first. So this is where we're actually going to cut. So make sure it's cut through. Just auto is fine. The next thing we're going to do is go to this tab right here, which is geometry tab, and contour selection. So we're going to use this arrow here. And I would just leave these like they are. Select same plane faces is off, all loops, and start outside. Don't need to touch those. But what we need to do is go and click on our things that we want to cut. So this is strictly things where we're going to cut all the way through the wood, okay, or plastic. So what I'm going to do is go around here and just click on these edges. Make sure you don't click on the face here because that might select some extra things that we don't want to cut. Like I don't want to cut my letters through on mine, so that's no good. If you ever accidentally select something, if you hold control and click it again, it'll unselect it. So you can see there I just have the outside edge. I do want to cut the circle, so I click that. Over here, same thing, outside edge, circles, and just keep going. And so these, again, are just the contours that you want to cut all the way through the material. So this is a little time consuming, but when you use, where you're going to have a mixture of engraving and cutting and scoring, this is really useful. Okay. So just about got everything. Those are hard to click on. Okay, so now I've got everything that I want to cut all the way through. I'm going to go to one more tab here. This is the passes tab. And what this is going to do is have information about how it's going to cut. And just make sure here it says sideways compensation left. That just means that it's going to leave room for that kerf, that 4/1000th of an inch. You shouldn't have to change anything here, but we're just checking to make sure it says left. And we're going to click OK. So what it's going to do right now is calculate the profile, and it's actually calculating where the laser is going to go to cut all these things. So that's done. So we have our first profile done. Great. So now we need to do another profile, and that's going to be for engraving things. So if you have anything that you want to score, which is where it just draws lines on the laser, or engrave, where it basically darkens an area, this is how we set that up. So we're going to go to cutting again, click on the 2D profile button, same button we used before. But now what we're going to go in, we're going to keep the same tool, but we're going to change our cutting mode. We're not going to be cutting through anymore. We're going to go to etch. So in Fusion, they call it etch. And in Glowforge, they call it either score or engrave, but it's the same idea. Go to your geometry tab here, contour selection. And now we're going to pick just those things that we want to engrave or score. So it's kind of hard to see. If you can't see your letters or other stuff, what you can do is use the display settings to change the visual style, and you can choose shaded with visible edges is a good one, and you can see it highlights those. It makes it a little easier to see what you're clicking on. So I just want to click the outline of my letters. Try not to click the inside of the letter like that, because that can cause some weird problems. Remember, if you accidentally click on something and you don't want to select it anymore, hold Control and it'll unselect. So I'm just going to get the edges of my letters, and I'm going to go around to all my pieces and do that because that's what I want to engrave. So the difference is these cuts here, first of all, they're going to be in a different layer of our SVG file. And the other thing about these is that because we're not cutting all the way through, we don't actually care about that kerf compensation. So they get a little different treatment. That's hard to line up sometimes. Okay, so there we go. So I got all those selected, just the parts that I want to engrave or score. I'm going to go over here to passes. And what you'll notice now in passes is that the sideways compensation, there's no compensation. It's doing a center cut. So it's going to cut exactly where we drew. It's not going to try to account for the width of the laser beam. Again, shouldn't have to change this. We're just checking it. So we're going to click OK. And then what it's going to do is create a second profile. So now we have two profiles, 2D profile 1, which is our cutting, 2D profile 2, which is our engraving or etching. Cool. So we're done with that now. The last thing to do is post-process. Post-process is basically Fusion's going to take all this information, we just get it, about what we want to cut, and it's going to take that and put it into an SVG file. And it'll have multiple layers so that we can separate out the cutting, engraving, etching, etc. So I'm going to go up here, Actions, Post-process, click that. And the first time you do this, it's going to make you set it up. And so what we have to do is get a post, which is basically it's a computer file. It's going to tell it how to deal with our cutting. And there should be nothing here when you start. So we're going to go over here to the right, the three dots, and click there, select a post from the library. It's going to take us to our library of posts. And you'll have my posts, you'll have local linked. Fusion 360 library has a lot in it. Those are all there. What we're going to do is go to cloud. All right, so we're going to go to the cloud library, and what we need to do is click this button. This is an import button. We're going to import a post processor into the cloud, and hopefully you downloaded your glowforge.cps from Google Classroom. That's the actual post processor. Double click that. And basically that installs that into your cloud library. And the reason we're using the cloud library for this post processor and our tools is that you can access it from any computer that you're on. You can access it from your Chromebook. So that's a nice way to do it. So we'll click select here. You can see now it says our post is Glowforge. We get to pick the name of our program. So I'm going to call this dice because it's the dice. You can select your output folder. I'm going to have it output to downloads. You can go over here and there's a selector here. You can open that folder. You can hit three dots and you can pick a folder on your computer. I chose downloads and hit select folder. Okay, great. Now I'm going to hit OK. So the post processor is set up. Now we got to do it one more time to make it actually do the processing. So that was a setup time. So go actions, post process, click it, and it's going to ask you to save a file, dice, and you can click save. In my case, it's saying it already exists because I already made one. I practiced. And you can hit yes. Cool. So it says it successfully posted that. So now what we're going to do is go get on Glowforge. So it's app.glowforge.com. And you'll need to log in. And username and password will be in Google Classroom in case you need it. And what we're going to do is create a new design. So I'm going to hit create, new blank design. We're going to click the plus sign to import our artwork. We're going to click upload. And then in your downloads folder on your computer, you should have dice. So there it is. And you can see it has a squid symbol because it's an Inkscape file. You can double click it and some stuff happens and boom, there you go. There are your dice. Um, and you'll lay it out on your material, whether it's plastic or wood. As always, try to conserve material. I don't have any material in the machine right now. Um, and you can see it's got the profile to cut on the outside, and it's also got our letters that we want to engrave. Look over here on the left, you can see it's separated it out for us, which is really nice. Um, so you can click over here on the left. So that's the letters. And what I'm going to do with those is engrave them. You could also score them. Score again is where it'll just draw the outline of the letters without cutting through. Engrave will actually fill in the letters. So I'm going to try that, engrave. And pick your material down here. I'm doing Baltic birch. There it is. And you can see it puts in a speed 600, power 80 there. And then I'm going to go down here and click on the next profile. So there's the things I want to cut, and chooses cut by default. And you just have to pick your material, Baltic birch. And you can see there it is. Looks good. It's going to cut the outlines and then engrave the letters. Last thing to do before you cut, click unknown here. This is going to let you set the material. We're going to tell it to use an uncertified material, and you want to put in a thickness here. You could either put 0.118 inches or just 3 mm is fine. Either one is fine. They're equivalent. And you hit submit, and then it'll focus it. It'll do some other stuff when it's ready to go. I'm offline right now, but you can click your print button, and then you're good to go. Remember, if you are cutting with a laser, make sure you turn on the air filter first. Um, if you need any help, let me know in class. Hope this was helpful, and good luck with your dice project.